Govind sir, we are beginning, right?
I think Dr. Dilip shall start with the welcome address, isn't it?
Yeah, we'll follow the program. We have a program.
Yeah, we can start.
Okay. Good morning, all. So, yet another upper defense in this is the third upper defense in a period of 30 days. So, we are happy to have this upper defense in the Department of Social Shankaracharya University. And for this auspicious occasion, very glad to invite you all to the event. So today, the upper defense of Ms. Shailendra Verma will be taking place on the topic urbanization and discursive formation of land use patterns, a study focusing on gentrification and social exclusion. Shailendra Verma is currently a research scholar of this department, and he is a faculty assistant professor of Department of Sociology in Samuri Gurayappan College, Kozhikode. And today's convener of the program and the supervising teacher, Dr. Dilip Kechi, the retired professor of our department. And he is here to convene this session, and I welcome him to the open defense, being a convener. Then today's chairperson of the program is Dr. Jose Boban. He is retired principal from Kerala College of Social Sciences, Trivandrum, and was head of the Department of Sociology at the same college. And more than that, he was also my teacher. I welcome him. Welcome, Dr. Jose Boban. Welcome to this session, and as a chairperson of the program. Welcome, sir.
Thank you.
And Mr. Shailendra Verma, the research scholar of the department, will be presenting the thesis and defending his thesis. I wish him all the very best, and I welcome Shailendra Verma also. Okay. And there are many faculty members from different colleges, universities, and research scholars, students belonging to different universities and institutions, and maybe his relatives, family members, friends, well-wishers. I welcome you all to this occasion to open defense bio examination of Shailendra Verma. And I invite Dr. Dilip Kechi to convene the session and go with the proceedings.
Good morning to all. Thank you, Dr. Biju. Today, the Department of Sociology of the Sri Shankaracharya University is conducting the open defense and viva voce examination in respect of Sri Shailendra Verma to online mode. This academic event is hosted, as you know, by Dr. Biju Vincent, who is the head of the Department of Sociology at the SSUs. The chairperson of the Board of Adjudicators is Dr. Jose Boban. Dr. Jose Boban is the former principal of the Loyola College, Trivandrum. He is an eminent sociologist who has specialized in ethnomedicine of Muduan Adivasi community of Kerala. The chairperson of the Board of Adjudicators will be conducting the readings online. Mr. Shailendra Verma is currently a faculty member of the Department of Sociology at the Samuri Gurayappan College, Kozhikode. The topic of his thesis, as already informed to you, is urbanization and discursive formation of land use patterns, study focusing on gentrification and social exclusion. The words of the researcher, this research attempts to address certain questions on the spatial dimensions of social life and its influence on producing and reproducing power relations through discursive formations. His endeavor is to study the impact of urbanization in bringing changes in the discourse on the dispossession and utilization of land, and to inquire the ways by which urban spaces are gentrified and socially and economically weaker sections are excluded. My duty as the supervisor of the candidate and the convener of the event is to extend welcome to the participants. So I extend a warm welcome to the respected head of the department, Dr. Biju Vincent, respected chairman of the Board of Adjudicators, Jose Boban, and the candidate Sri Shailendra Verma to the occasion. I am also honored to welcome the renowned professors, faculty members, and students from various departments to this academic events. I also welcome other participants to this academic event. So the candidate may take 30 minutes to present his thesis, and I suggest him to limit his presentation within the stipulated time. The participants of the open defense can ask questions and seek clarifications on the permission of the chairperson after the candidate's presentation. With that, I request Dr. Jose Boban to initiate the proceedings of the open defense and Viva Voce examination. Thank you. Dr. Jose Boban, please.
Good morning to all. Respected supervising teacher of the study, Dr. Dilip KG, HOD of the Department of Sociology, Dr. Biju Vincent, the researcher, Sri Shailendra Verma R, and all other faculty members from various colleges and universities and sociologists who are participating in this program, all the research scholars, and even other people from even other disciplines who may participate in this program. A warm welcome to all. My pleasant duty is to chair this important academic event. First of all, I am thankful to the Sri Shankaracharya University of Sanskrit College for selecting me to chair this open defense of Sri Shailendra Verma. As we know, this is one of the most important academic exercises in a university. So I request all the participants to actively listen the presentation of the thesis, and later you may ask questions or seek clarifications. Definitely give your comments too, which can enrich the session. As Dr. Dilip already mentioned, the researcher can take 30 minutes for his presentation, and afterwards I will ask my questions. Also, there are questions from the part of the other two adjudicators. I keep all of them after the presentation, so that after the presentation all the participants can interact with the researcher if they have something to ask. Then I will conduct the Viva Voce examination. So I wish all success and my best wishes to Sri Shailendra Verma for his effective presentation. And with this few comments, few words, I invite Sri Shailendra Verma for the presentation. Thank you all.
Thank you, sir. Respected Jose Boban, sir, Chairman of the Board of Adjudicators, Professor Dr. KG Dilip, sir, convener of this meeting, and my research supervisor, Dr. Biju Vincent, Head of the Department of Sociology, Sri Shankaracharya University of Sanskrit College, my fellow research scholars, colleagues, well-wishers, friends, it is indeed my great pleasure and privilege to present my PhD thesis in this esteemed academia. I'll try to make my presentation brief, precise, and comprehensive. So let me begin the presentation with the explanations on my title. The title is definitely Urbanization and Discursive Formation of Land Use Patterns, a study focusing on gentrification and social exclusion. Okay, the title clearly states that the research is centered on three aspects. First, the process of urbanization as the subject matter, the study of discursive formation on land use patterns as a major concern, and special attention on two social phenomena, that is gentrification and social exclusion. So let me explain the domain, area, and major concern in this study in a bit detailed manner. The domain of study is the research is centered on the domains of urban sociology and urban ecology, which is an offshoot of human ecology, which perceives urbanness as a product of spatial practices or human interventions on environment, making resultant change in the social organization and means of subsistence of the people belonging to a specific territory. The central assumption of the urban sociological tradition, which can be traced in Durkheim's work or Weberian work, is that the size and density of urban population exert an independent effect on social organization and the consequences for human experience and behavior. Premised as it is on the effects of the physical environment, the core of urban sociology is essentially a body of studies on human ecology. So these two are closely interrelated. So among the various social dimensions of urbanization, here the human ecological dimensions are taken into consideration, and the same has been perceived under the domain of sociology of urban, sociology of spatial transformation. So broadly we can say that the study is under the domain of sociology of spatial transformation. Now we move on to the major concerns of research. The major concern of this study is definitely the process of urbanization. Here, urbanization is viewed as a process of transformation from natural environment to built environment, and the so-called village or the rural situation is predominantly a natural environment, whereas in urban centers, the built spaces are more predominant. In contrary to the, that is the perceiving urbanization as a spatial transformation, this study focusing on the significant factors contributing to the geomorphological transformation like land possession, fragmentation, dispossession, and changes in the land use patterns, and looks into the relationship of the people's perceptions on these aspects. The basic premises on which the research problem is formulated can be explained as follows. Built environment is a product of spatial transformation or changes in the land use. With the democratization of political power, the land became more accessible to the common man, making it a private space which is consumable, commoditized, and amenable to manipulations for various purposes. Thus, spatial transformation can be well assumed as a product of socio-cultural, economic, and political discourses which determines its possession, control, and utilization. So broadly, the present study tries to explore how does urbanization, which involves a transformation of natural environment to built environment, is responsible to bring out changes in the land use patterns. How do the discursive change on land use patterns vary with respect to various levels of urbanization? How much the discursive changes on land use pattern are responsible for gentrification of geospaces? What are the various factors by which the socially and economically weaker sections are excluded during the process of urbanization? And what are the experiences of excluded people? This leads to the second objective of the research, which seeks to describe the better understanding of realities of everyday life in the socially excluded neighborhoods. So now we move on to the explanation on the research problem. It is mainly to study the impact of urbanization in bringing changes in the discourse of the possession, dispossession, and utilization of land, and to inquire the ways by which socially and economically weaker sections are excluded with the interventions of the centers of power, and the process of gentrification emerges with the urbanization processes. So theoretically and conceptually, this study is owes to the concept of spatialities. Theoretically, this study is an attempt to explore how spatialities are constructed on the basis of land use, in rural and urban discourses. To achieve this, the researcher mainly dwelt on the theoretical and the analytical framework of Henry Lefebvre, David Harvey, Edward Soja, Manuel Castells, Michel Foucault, and few others. Now, the basic theoretical premise of the research is the concept of space itself. According to Henry Lefebvre, space is both a product and a determinant of social relations and actions, and space combines the physical, mental, and social dimensions. So, here space is assumed as an ensemble of three dimensions: the physical, mental, and social. This is a theoretical premise which connects spatial configuration with human consciousness. And according to David Harvey, geographical space is a product of social relations and historical practices as they become embedded with the spatial forms and structures. This viewpoint is helpful in this research to explain the socio-political situation in which the major land acts were initiated in Kerala. And another dimension of this research is the inclination towards the discursive formations. Here, power discourse and spatial transformation is analyzed in a Marxian perspective in which economic determinism is given priority. Economic determinism is significant in Kerala as the land reform initiatives made radical changes in the agrarian social structure. Land reform initiatives were not just meant for redistribution of land, but also prompted a large-scale social reform. It can be conceived as a spatial product, facilitating a conical power relation, and any change in this situation is thus a discursive change. In this work, the spatial transformation as a consequence of changes in land use pattern is conceptualized as manifestation of urbanization process. By adopting a critical view, the researcher approaches urbanization as a spatial process leading to social exclusion and gentrification. Again, I'm coming to the basic pillars of this research, the concept of space. As I have explained, the Henry Lefebvre talked about three levels of spaces: abstract, crude, and natural space. And he also talked about the spatialities, and he conceived space as a social product, and every society produces its own social spaces. Harvey's idea of space is also very close to the theoretical framework. Social relations are always spatial and exist within a certain produced framework of spatialities. Manuel Castells' idea of space is also relevant here. The essence of his conceptualization is the dialectical tension between the historically rooted local spatial organization of human experience. This clearly depicts the significance of historical aspects in developing spatial configurations. So the major literature reviews, I have gone through around 1,050 references, but here I am only listing the most important references. Of course, there are 42 such references. There are works by the Indian authors on the history of agrarian communities, history of Kerala, and the land reform initiatives. And there are prominent works on the theoretical dimensions like space, power, and all, especially by Henry Lefebvre, David Harvey. And there are some other important works on the colonial rule and the medieval land tenure systems like that of Irfan Habib, K.N. Panikkar, and all. So these are the, and there are some prominent literatures in Malayalam, like Malabar Pattanangal by N.M. Nambudiri. And one of the major literature I have used predominantly in this work is the local history, a work on local history of the Vaniyangulam Panchayat written by, that was published by KCHR in 1991. And the coordinator of that particular work was Dr. P.K. Shivadas. So this is also one of the major literature, comes under the reference. Now, from the theoretical views, it can be inferred as, so broadly when we look at all these literatures on space, it can be inferred that space is a social construction and discourse driven. And space has a representational value. Space has an aesthetic dimensions, and space is subjected to manipulative and strategic interventions. This is very relevant in the case of capitalist interventions. And space is a controlled entity under centers of power. So the configuration of space always comes under difference. It will go on changing according to the interest of the centers of power. It is multidimensional and is oriented towards possession. urbanization. Here, like space, urbanization is also perceived in a theoretical level. Lefebvre opines that as urbanization extends to the countryside, it creates peripheries of towns and destroys all villages. Nature is challenged by this domination. So the interconnection between nature and urbanization is found to be very significant. Urbanization had played a significant role in the ascendancy of the bourgeoisie, of bourgeois thought, and attendant exploitation and alienation of the proletariat. So as a Marxian geographer, he was very much concerned with the capitalist intervention on the urban spaces. The ideological framework used in this research is critical. Though the initial transformation from a rural social condition to a suburban or a semi-urban social condition is natural, its further stages are strategic and planned. So here, the developmental endeavors are also considered to be considered in a critical viewpoint. Various forms of capitals and power configurations are influential in determining one's right over an urban space, making it unaffordable and inaccessible to certain sections. So as the urbanization progresses, the land becomes inaccessible to certain sections of people. The conceptual framework, urbanization, as I have explained before, urbanization here assumed as the transformation from natural environment to built environment. It is mainly done because the study is under the domain of spatial transformation. The term built environment refers to the human-made surroundings that provide the settings for human activity. It is commonly seen that the village or rural situation is predominantly a natural environment where the built spaces are very less. Urbanization can be viewed as a process of increased manipulation of geospaces by the human beings for various purposes, and thus it is a spatial transformation. Discourse. The term discourse and discourse analysis are foci of very heterogeneous body of theory. We can find this concept in various academia. Discourses in society can be performative as well as descriptive because they are embedded with material social practices, codes of behavior, institutions, and constructed environments. The conceptualization and analysis of socio-spatial practices and discourses of space and places can be bridged. So this is something about the discourse, but here the focus is mainly on the discursive formation. The concept of discursive formation on land use pattern can be theorized by using the Foucauldian concept of archaeology and genealogy. His discourse theory forms part of his archaeology. What he is interested in is studying the archaeologically are rules that determine the statements, which statements are accepted as meaningful and true in a particular historical approach. So this study also is a longitudinal study which also, theoretically traces the genealogy and archaeology of the discourse of land use. The Foucault offers the term to refer to essentially when it is possible to define a regularity between statements. Here, another term is also very important, land fragmentation. Van Dyck distinguishes 4 types of land fragmentation: fragmentation of land ownership, fragmentation of land use, fragmentation within a farm or a land segment, and fragmentation due to the separation of ownership. All these types of land fragmentations are very relevant here because land use patterns have been considerably changed because of the reforms and commoditization of land and all those things. So here, land fragmentation is also a very important concept. Land use. The term land use is generally used in agricultural research, but here in this context, it is used in a very different sense. Land use is the human use of land. Land use involves the management and modification of natural environment. It also has been defined as the arrangements, activities, and inputs people undertake in a certain land cover type to produce, change, or maintain it. In this study, the abstract spatial transformation is conceived empirically in terms of land and the land use. Thus depicts the human intervention on spatial practices. So, as we all know, space is an abstract theoretical concept. So this spatial transformation here in this work is empirically conceived as changes in land use patterns. The term land use pattern under the theoretical framework of this research consists of a troika. There are 3 components in this particular aspect: the spatial context, the spatial composition, and the spatial configuration. The spatial context includes land relation, nature of control, and social inequalities. The spatial composition includes the physical dimensions like land type, topography, and land produce. The spatial configuration that includes inequalities of various kinds in connection with the accessibility and affordability. So it can be said that the land use pattern of a given territory reflects people's perception on land, preferences and choice on its use, chances of manipulation. So this is why the land use pattern became a major concern of the study. Again, another prominent concern is concept is the concept of gentrification. The British anthropologist Ruth Class conceptualized gentrification as a process of working class displacement that changes the district's prevailing social character. The features of gentrification includes influx of middle class households, renovation of working class housing, displacement of tenants from gentrifying neighborhoods, etc. This process is very relevant in this research because here one of the major propositions of this research is gentrification is not purely an urban phenomenon. It starts during the process of urbanization. Even in rural areas, we can find the glimpses of urbanization, gentrification. So another concept is social exclusion. Exclusion generally conceived as something that is done by some people to other people. Exclusion may be seen as the denial or non-realization of the civil, political, and social rights of the citizenship. In this research, social exclusion is conceptualized as the socio-spatial disadvantage of certain sections of people due to their socio-cultural situations. So this is something about the conceptual framework. Now coming to the methodology part, the researcher here attempted a comprehensive approach, and the objectives of research extend to the concerns of other academic disciplines like geography, political science, and history. Methodology adopted in this study can be generally perceived as naturalistic inquiry, and mixed methods have been adopted for data collection. Before explaining the methodology, I would like to say that deliberate attempts have been made to make the research more comprehensive, and therefore the quantitative dimensions of research, that kind of a categorization is deliberately avoided. The sociological dimensions of land use patterns are historical, and thus narratives are used for analyzing the changes in land use patterns over a period of time. So here the qualitative data have been used. So secondary sources like official records, lithomaps, etc. are used to study the spatial dimensions of land use patterns like land fragmentation, and by selecting specific cases. So in this context, I have used extensively statistical data on land use, transactions of land, number of land segments, and all. The spatial dimensions of changes in land use patterns are inquired by in-depth interviews from various segments of the population. So now coming to the specific objectives of research, to examine the change in the land use patterns with the transformation of the social spaces from rural to predominantly natural environment to urban or predominantly built environment. Second, to study the perceptions of people belonging to a specific area regarding the possession and utilization of land, to analyze the impact of urbanization on weaker sections by taking into account of their affordability and accessibility of urban spaces, to examine the possibility of social exclusion of the disadvantaged sections due to fragmentation and push factors like migration and all. The research design is generally perceived as longitudinal design. Longitudinal design is used for the purpose of studying the social perceptions on land use, and also to inquire the ways by which certain categories of people are excluded. Here I have used extensively the longitudinal data. In this research, aspects like land use, land fragmentation, decollectivization, extent of land abandonment, and intensity of commoditization are significant determinants of changes in land use pattern, and these aspects were assessed by using longitudinal data. Now coming to the population. Population of this study is the people belonging to a specific rural territory which is under transformation to an urban space. The geographical territory was selected by taking into account of the spatial, demographic, economic, and political situations, and also availability of authentic data. Peculiar conditions significantly contributed to urbanization, like construction of highways, mega projects, migratory movements, etc. are also taken into consideration. By taking into consideration of all the above stated criteria, Vaniyankulam Panchayat in Palakkad district was selected as the field of study, and the people belonging to that area comes under the category of population. And in Vaniyankulam, there are 5 deshams. As we all know, the concept of desham is a geographical territory. There are 5 deshams in Vaniyankulam. Amsham is called village in popular parlance, and out of which 2 deshams, Kotayur and Kulachitra, are selected for a detailed analysis. It is mainly because these are the 2 deshams which is small in size but higher the number of land segments. That clearly depicts the intense land fragmentation and transactions in these two deshams while comparing to the other 3 deshams. Sample constitute. So the sample constitute two deshams in Wanyankulam Panchayat. The land use patterns are categorized into 6, and these are Thotam, Stirampuncha, Astirapuncha, Nanja 1, Nanja 2, and Nigudi Gattatu. These are the terms which is given in the basic tax register, or in Malayalam it is called Tandapir register. So I have adopted the same terminology for this research also. The data collection procedure. First, selection of 30 plots or subdivisions and collecting the details of extent of possession, noting the land type, traditional owners, and the location. Here I will give you an example for this is this detail, the nature of the details given in basic tax register. This is something about the survey number 13 of the basic tax register. There are 4 subdivisions in this particular land segment, and these 4 subdivisions are also constituted by different land types like Stirampunja. One subdivision is a Stirampunja, another subdivision is a Thotam, and third subdivision is also a Stirampunja. That was a Stirampunja which later converted into a Thotam. And the 4th is an Astirapunja. Astirapunja means uneven dry land. And the number of land segments in each of these land types is also given. And I have also inquired how many land transactions took place in these land segments over the period of time. So this is why the first step have been carried out. In the second step, gathering narratives on the selected plots. As I have already explained, 25 or to 30 plots I have identified as the significant cases. And from these plots, I have tried to identify the traditional landowner, locating the area, after locating the area, observing the cases of conversion of land types, if any. Thirdly, recognizing changes in the land use pattern by surveying number of houses, commercial establishments that came up in this area, changes in agricultural activities, mode of management of property, existing dwellers or users, number of transactions, period of intense transaction, etc. After this, I have tried to identify the maximum number of owners, dwellers, users, and then proceeded with a detailed data collection using in-depth interviews. So the respondents are basically related to these selected land segments, and this is how the second step have been carried out. In the third step, after identifying the respondents, I have tried to collect the data regarding period of initial land partition, sale and its causes, details of persons who sold the property and the causes of disposition, present dwellers and their use of land, native, non-native configurations, period and duration of possession, preliminary details of intention of land possession, changes in land value and land use and its causes, perceptions on land use patterns. And the step 4 is something about the narratives, analysis of narratives, and identifying significant factors that contributed to land possession and dispossession, utilization, changes in land use, causes and consequences, fragmentation, commoditization, expansion of built spaces. And after all these things, the conclusions are drawn. The chapterization, after the preliminary and the chapters, that is Introduction, Literature Review and Research Methodology, there are 3 analysis chapters, which are the discursive formation of land use patterns in Kerala with special reference to Wanyankulam, land fragmentation, urbanization and spatial transformation, urbanization, gentrification and social exclusion. So coming to the first analysis chapter on discursive formation of land use patterns, I have identified the following discursive formations connected to the spatial transformation, and these discursive formations are: the initial discursive formation is land as livelihood, then land as a controlled entity, especially with the development of principalities, land as a determinant of power, which is also connected to the tenureship, land as an exchangeable property, which directly related to the colonial rule, in which the land possession could be transferred by paying a particular amount of money, and land as an objective of possession, that is a post-independence discourse, especially after the land reforms. The land became an object of possession. Land as a pledgeable property. The emergence of cooperative banks in rural sector is very significant in this regard. before the land reforms, the number of landowners were very few in number, but after the land reforms, it multiplied many times, and more landowners, when the number of landowners increased, they definitely started pledging their properties for many purposes. Land as a legal entity, this is also another discourse. Land as a potential capital or commodity, which this kind of a discourse began in 1990s, especially with the immigration, remittance economy and all, and land as an environmental concern. That is the most recent discourse on land use, especially after the natural calamities took place in Kerala in the recent years. Along with identifying the major discursive formations related to land use patterns, the social and political context in which all these predominant ideas on land emerged also analyzed. The most significant observation is that land is not just a piece of dwelling or livelihood, but is a major determinant of social status, and any changes in land relations have ripple effects on the entire social structure. In Kerala, the land reform initiative was not just a political or legal endeavor, but was a significant determinant of social reform due to its impact on making changes in the power structure of the agrarian economy, which was centered on the possession of land. So, from the study of 10 cases, the major causes of land fragmentation are found to be the land reform initiative, land assignments, land partition and changes in the land possession, expansion of education, migration and changes in the population composition, development of non-agricultural sectors and changes in work culture, commoditization of land, and of course the People's Plan campaign and development initiatives. So there are references about the consequences of dilution of various legislations also in making environmental issues. Most of the stringent provisions that were unfavorable to the elite classes were amended or averted in due course of time by the successive governments. This is also a very significant factor that some or other way influenced in making changes in the land use pattern. So these are this argument is well in tune with the theoretical premise of this research that land use is a discursive practice, and therefore the changes in land use patterns are presumably in accordance with the changes in the discursive formations. And I move on to the significant observations in that particular chapter. Land reform initiatives have a profound impact on the social and spatial transformation of the rural social setting. Administrative mechanism vested with the responsibility of implementation of the land was corrupted, mismanaged, or favorable to the prominent landlords. Even after coming to the force of the Act on 1st of April 1964, the eviction of tenants or kudigidappukas continued on a large scale. In some cases, land assignment was also carried out for political gains to gain the support of various communities. The landowners allocated small dwelling spaces to the agricultural laborers and made them landholders. After making them landholders, there is no right for them to claim for the land possession. Some narratives also indicate that the major intention of the agricultural laborers during the land reforms was to own a piece of land for dwelling, not to get liberated from the prolonged bonded land relations. They got satisfied with a piece of land for dwelling. So that kind of a class struggle or a massive agitation was not seen in those periods. Major causes of this situation are the absence of a class conflict between landowners and laborers, lack of awareness about the legal provisions, and interventions of the dominant forces in the process of land allocation. Political affiliation is also found to be a very significant aspect. Now coming to the second analysis chapter on land fragmentation and urbanization and spatial transformation. Here partition, the causes and consequences of land fragmentation are explained. The disputes on land possession and partitions were major factors that influence initial land fragmentation and land abandonment. Family disputes on land possession is also a very significant factor. Land partitions, especially during 1964 to 1976, for evading land ceiling was a significant factor leading to initial land fragmentation that also caused making changes in this family structure and migration. The conflict between various caste groups and restrictions and preferences regarding land allocation of land were crucial factors. There were certain favorable sections to the landlords, and they were the main beneficiaries of these land assignment process. Now I have already explained the consequent amendments. That is a very important aspect. that was most of the amendments were a dilution of the first act and facilitated free and unrestricted use and exchange of land. The provisions in the act regarding the conversion of the forest land into revenue land also made drastic environmental consequences, especially in the high range areas. That is not a concern of this particular research. Land abandonment was a major cause of land conversions, and the provisions of KLU order gave legal validity to most of the cases of land. KLU, Kerala Land Utilization Order, is a very significant legal enactment in this area. It is also to be noted that in the introductory passage of KLU, it has given that it is something in accordance with the 1952 Commodities Act, Essential Commodities Act. But nowhere in that particular act we can see the lands has to be converted into for the purpose of other purposes. So these kind of things are not there in the Essential Commodities Act, but this particular order is specifically meant for land conversions. So this is something to be considered as a very drastic legal enactment, which have made drastic changes in the environmental aspects. Most of the lands assigned to the intermediaries were Palyal. Palyal means Nanja 1 land, and the Janmis retained Nanja 2 type of land. Nanja 1 land means the harvesting one time, and Nanja 2 lands is 2-time harvesting plots. When agriculture declines, and when the Palyal lands were converted into residential and commercial plots, in prime locations, the landholders of these properties became more prosperous. So this can be identified as an emergence of a new class of landholders, an affluent section. During the period of 1950 to 1970, partition deeds were more common, more in number than sale agreements. And commoditization of land. Those who possessed land near to the main central road and in major commercial spaces, either by purchase or by land assignment provision, became dominant classes in the later periods. The emergence of a new class of landholders who possessed land in prime locations made a restructuring of social class in rural societies. The development of roads, especially in the interior parts of the village, and starting of bus services were important in determining the land price. Role of development initiatives, as we all know, the People's Planning Program. The development of roads has got high priority in the plenary sessions in Grama Sabhas than basic needs. Development of road facilities intensified land transactions and making land a potential source of income. The presence of real estate agents came into light only during 1990s, and it still has a great influence in commoditizing the land. Emergence of housing colonies and apartments in this village was also seemed to be seemingly well connected with the development initiatives in this area. Education and migration are also found to be very significant factors. The impact of these changes is reflected in land partition, land abandonment, land fragmentation, and land commoditization, and ultimately in land use patterns. Migration is a major cause of land abandonment and subsequent dispossession. In recent times, the most significant factors that contributed to the urbanization process in the area are the establishment of a higher secondary school and medical college with a large hospital. Land possession is also regarded as a potential investment. It is also assured the commoditization of land and subsequent increase in land price. It increased the affordability of people, and this process is clearly reflected in this study. Now coming to the last analysis chapter, urbanization, gentrification, and social exclusion. Here I have taken 10 parameters to study the expansion of built spaces, the expansion of dwelling spaces, the expansion of trading spaces, the expansion of small industries and service ventures, expansion of automobile sector, expansion of business establishment, educational institutions, banks and private financial services, government offices, medical and health facilities, and some other built spaces. All the data collected by direct observation and reviews and from the secondary sources, and all these things have been consolidated and tabulated. Detailed descriptions are given in each of these categories along with the tables for understanding the trends of expansion of built spaces. Increasing number in each item indicates the expansion, and by comparing the periodical variations in the frequency, it is possible to get the general idea about the trends of urbanization. Along with this data, I have used the data published by the Economic and Statistical Survey also. There are references on the expansion of built spaces in these reports. Gentrification and social exclusion. Expansion of built spaces in Vaniyakulam Panchayat took place mainly during the period 1990 to 2000. The early stages of urbanization in Vaniyakulam are connected with the development of commercial activities in the market area. Definitely, this market area has undergone severe changes in the later periods. The emergence of housing colonies during 1990s is also a very important factor. In recent times, of course, I have already explained, most of the residential spaces of chettis located in the center of the village were converted into shops and commercial establishment. The commoditization of land, especially in the potential spaces of commercial activities, led to spatial exclusion of the traditional occupants who were socially and economically disadvantaged than the new settlers and the entrepreneurs. So now coming to the conclusion, the study revealed that the recent discursive formation, land as a potential capital or commodity, is directly consequent to the land reform initiatives. Remittance economy is influential in intensifying commoditization of land, contrary to the Marxian idea of the emergence of industrial capitalism as an aftermath of class conflict in the feudal mode of production. Here, the land itself became a potential capital that gave birth to a new form of capital, non-industrial capitalism. The development of non-industrial capitalism is directly related to the commoditization of land, and it also points out the possibility of a new class of landowners in the context of transformation of the rural societies. Urbanization has progressive and liberative dimensions also, as a process which dilutes the rigidity of traditional land relations and reduces the caste-based social distance. As per the census reports, the literacy rate and the number of agricultural laborers are negatively correlated. From this study, it is also found that the process of gentrification begins in the particular stage of urbanization. It is not an exclusive urban phenomenon. It gets intensified when control over the prime locations are completely under the possession of prominent classes. Peri-urbanization is also recognized as a major factor that contribute to the urbanization process. New census territories are coming up close to the urban centers. In Vaniyakulam Panchayat, there are two villages, Vaniyakulam 1 and Vaniyakulam 2. Here I have studied Vaniyakulam 1 because Vaniyakulam 2 is very close to the Ottapallam municipality, which has already become an urban center. So these differences can be seen. There is a continuum in the process of spatial transformation, decollectivization, increase in number of landowners, land fragmentation, changes in land types, increase in land possession, and commoditization of geospaces. So this is we can identify a continuous process of spatial transformation while looking at the changes in the rural areas. This study proposes the significant presence of a nexus between the three categories of people: the investors or the capitalists, the political authorities, and the real estate agents. This troika is very significant in determining the spatial dimensions of urbanization, and therefore in this context, the power embeddedness of spatial transformation is obvious, and the philosophical and theoretical lineage of the study, as described in the initial chapters, is clearly justified. So the objective of research is clearly justified that urbanization is definitely it's a power embedded practice which also some or other way lead to social exclusion and gentrification. So this is the crux of my PhD thesis, and in the appendices, this is the form of the basic tax register. This is the tax ledger in which we can get the ideas about the taxpayers. This is something we call as a lithomap, by which I have identified the locations of different land segments. These are the respondents' profile. This is how I have explained, I have analyzed the expansion of built spaces in different categories. And satellite images are also used to assess the expansion of built spaces over the period of time. We can have the satellite images from 2003 in Google Earth, and from the pictures itself, it is apparent that the built spaces are gradually expanded, and in 2020 we can find only a few green patches in this village. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Shailendra Verma, for your detailed presentation. And from the presentation, all the participants must have understood what are the major dimensions of this research. At the same time, you may have your own doubts. So now the floor is open, so the participants can see clarifications from the researcher. Also, you can pass your comments, and it can be some time can be taken for that. And this is one of the very important aspects of this open defense, because many of the participants may have their own experiences in this field. So through your comments and clarifications and questions, you can also enrich this whole program. So now the floor is open for discussions, and now I invite the participants to pose your questions to the researcher, and the researcher can take down the questions, so that after receiving a few questions, you can answer them rather than answering each and every question.
Okay.
After you answer the questions, then again the participants can seek more clarifications. That's all. Thank you.
Very good morning, all. This is Dr. Saju Nair from Thammaran Guruvayurappan College. Firstly, I congratulate Sri Shailendra Verma for your very systematic and precise presentation. In the methodology, you mentioned about naturalistic method. So can you mention what it implies?
I think a few more questions can be received before giving the answer. Okay, Shailendra, you can answer if no other questions are coming.
Naturalistic inquiry is basically the study of social phenomena in its natural setting. One of the significant feature of naturalistic inquiry is the extensive field work. Usually what we do is, before going to the field, we develop a theoretical framework, we fix the objectives of study, we always fix the methods to be adopted in the data collection and all. But in naturalistic study, of course, we will be having a theoretical framework, a broad theoretical framework, not precise. By keeping this theoretical framework, the researcher enters the field, gets familiarized with the happenings in that particular field, like an ethnography. But unlike ethnography, this is not purely focusing on the cultural dimensions. It focuses on all the aspects, all the dimensions of a particular concern of research. Here, so naturalistic inquiry is something always presupposes field-based objectives. It always intended to generate original objectives, most appropriate objectives from by keeping the theoretical, the broad theoretical perspective as it is. But it is also to be noted that this theoretical approach also can be revised according to the existing realities. So it presupposes many things. One is the assumption of multiple realities. So in sociology, what we see is when we conceptualize the research problem, we always focus on purely sociologically significant aspects. But it is not so. Here, if we find that some other dimensions like geographical dimensions or psychological dimensions, which is also seemingly very significant to this particular research, that also has to be incorporated by modifying our theoretical perspectives accordingly. And it is also an offshoot of constructivism. We all know that it accepts that the philosophy that the philosophy that the realities are socially constructed, and that is why the fieldwork experiences and sharing the experience of the local people is found to be very significant and very important in naturalistic inquiry. And the acceptance, it also accepts the unexpected or extreme responses. And researchers' subjectivity is also given priority, because in sociology research, what we find is we always strive for objectivity and keep all the dispositions of the researcher and ideological aspects or the political aspects apart from the research, because we always focus on the quantitative dimensions of data. So in naturalistic inquiry, these subjective dispositions as well as ideological preoccupations will also take into consideration, and this is more comprehensive by nature in that manner. So this is why, of course, this is very close to grounded theory, and even it is close to participatory research, but participant observation and all, but it is more field specific rather than what methodology specific. The methodology is always will change according to the distinct nature of the field of study. This is the general idea I can give you about the naturalistic inquiry.
Okay, Shailendra. Thank you.
Okay, other questions?
Okay. I will check. Spatial implications of social expression.
Shankar Verma, he has a question.
Ranjit Raj.
This means, as a researcher, were there any backlashes that you had to confront when it comes to identifying the social space, both in terms with the rural panchayat as well as with the urban? Just simple.
Actually, this particular research was focusing exclusively on a rural space. So I never had that kind of an experience, because of course the political authorities were always supportive to this particular endeavor. And of course, one of the major problem I have faced was while studying the environmental consequences. The panchayat authorities were always blaming the revenue department for diluting the legislations. And what they said is, when the permission for land conversion was vested on the revenue department, all these manipulations had took place. But now the panchayat, it is vested with the panchayat, and so these kind of political issues, they always claim that some authorities are responsible, and now the panchayat is looking after all these things and taking care of all these environmental concerns and all. So definitely there are conflicts and lack of consensus regarding many things, but as a field study, I have considered all these things in my research and discussed in a detailed manner. So when you look at the cases, you get a clear idea about the pros and the different forms and different perceptions on land by different authorities and different categories of people. And coming to the question proposed by Ranjit, that was something about the spatial dimensions, right? Implications. Oh yeah, definitely. That I have already explained in the presentation session. One of the major spatial implication is the dispossession of land in the prime locations. Most of the lower, the labor classes, they had possession over in the prime locations of that village. Now they have resettled. In the data shows that in 1950s, there were 140 Chetty families. They were settled in the very close to the market, cattle market, because their livelihood was purely dependent on the market activities. So out of these 140s, now only 36 families remain, and most of the families sold their property. They left the state because they were immigrant communities. And in 2000, there were only 35 families. And now, according to the latest, right now, there is only 14 families remain there. So from 140 to the 40, this is a very significant transformation, which is having a kind of spatial implication. All their dwelling spaces are now converted into commercial spaces. Now that is why this particular village are now seemingly like an urban center, and these settlement areas which also very close to the newly established medical college. We can expect further expansions in due course. Thank you.
Participants may ask questions or seek clarifications through the chat box also. Please send your questions or the clarifications chat box, please.
Any other participant with a clarification?
There's one more here.
Do you have any observations in connection with demonetization? Might have.
Do you have any observation in connection with demonetization?
Maybe
Demonetization.
in that particular work, I have not that much discussed this particular aspect, because the major objectives of study was not to focus on the commoditization of land. Definitely, we can find that the commoditization of land is very close to the NRI, the so-called remittance economy. I have explained these aspects in many places in my thesis, but exclusive focus is not given to these things. Some of the land agents have given an opinion that in the recent periods, especially after the demonetization, the land transactions have considerably declined. That is the only thing. You could observe.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
There is another question. Have you used a framework analysis in your research, in your thesis? Yeah, a broad theoretical framework is definitely used. That is why I have used the, I think you have.
Please read the question so that have you used a framework analysis in your thesis? A question from Dr. Salita.
The theoretical framework is definitely used in this paper because the space itself is a theoretical concept. It is an abstract concept which can only explain, which can be, we cannot have a very pure empirical research on spatial transformation, because the concept of space itself is a theoretical formulation. So, as I said, the broad theoretical framework is definitely owes to the works of Henri Lefebvre, David Harvey, and broadly the Marxian perspective, in which the geographical condition is always subjected to change according to the interest of the centers of power. This is the broad framework, and that is why this study became a critical appraisal of the land changes in the land use patterns. Thank you.
Dr. Dilip, shall we go forward if there are no more questions?
Yes, I think so. I think so. There is
Yeah,
another.
there is one more question in the chat box. Yeah.
Yadu Krishnan KK, he asked, Sir, relevance of study explain cheyamo.
Thank you for that question. One of the major thing which is going to be alarming, which came to my attention with this study is the intervention of centers of power in changing land use patterns. Definitely, being a critical study, we should have a critical approach towards the intervention of the capitalist forces in making the geomorphology more favorable to the capitalist interests. You can see that the environmental situation in rural areas are drastically changing. The legal legislations are also diluted according to the interest of the public. The so-called public is always in question because most of the political authorities, even in Grama Sabhas, what I found is there were 14 subcommittees in that particular Grama Sabha. Each subcommittees were formed on the basis of a particular cause. A particular subcommittee was formed for the welfare of the backward sections. Another was something for the health issues, for the development in health sector. Another was formed for the waste management practices. But out of these 14 subcommittees, the subcommittee which was formed for the development of road was always crowded. There was no discussion in all the other subcommittees. The people were least bothered about the waste management issues. In Wanengulam, it is seen that even after the enactment of the People's Planning Program in 1995, even now there is no proper waste management mechanism. Even a dumping ground is not there. So the priorities are always favorable to the capitalist forces, and this always signifies the alarming trends of capitalist interventions in making the geographies favorable to their people. So that is the relevance of this particular study. So the critical perspective should have to be developed. We should have a more human-centric and eco-centric perspective towards the changes in land use patterns. Thank you.
Dr. Boban, I think there is no.
Okay.
So,
Okay, Dr. Dilip. I consider that the researcher has answered all the questions well. Thank you. Now it is time for me to ask questions and present the comments of the other two adjudicators. Actually, all the three examiners unanimously agreed that this is a well-written thesis with a significant contribution to the studies on urbanization. However, there are some critical comments of the examiners, so that the researcher can respond to them now. The first examiner pointed out that the impact of Gulf migration on land fragmentation and land commoditization has not received enough attention in this study. He pointed out that in many villages of Malabar, Gulf migration resulted in replacing the old class divide between the landowners and the agricultural workers by Gulf migrants and non-migrants. So what is your response to that?
Yeah, that particular observation is very relevant. Definitely, Gulf migration has a profound impact on making changes in the land use patterns. But the major objective of this research was to identify the discursive formation, and the impact of Gulf migration in changing the land use pattern is related to the commoditization of land, which could be identified only after 1990s. So definitely I have given due attention to this particular process, but in a larger perspective, my focus was rather on the genealogy of land use patterns and discursive formations. Another thing is, as it is more close to the commoditization of land, it is more close to the economics of land use patterns. Being a sociological inquiry, my focus was mainly on the social transformations, the changes in the agrarian social structure and all. That is why I have given priority to study the impact of land reforms than focusing on the impact of remittance economy. I think another thing is that itself needs a comprehensive study, an exclusive study. It's a very elaborated thing which cannot be considered as a subsection of a particular research. Even though I have given due attention to this particular aspect, and if you go through the 10 cases I have selected, in 3 or 4 cases, these particular aspects have been discussed. So I think I have attended this particular aspect, but as a broad study, this particular aspect could not be given a priority.
Okay. I agree with you that I have noticed that you have a very good historic sense, and you have unearthed many of the very critical, pertinent issues which existed in Kerala society even before this prominent Gulf migration. So what you said is correct. This is only one of the dimensions which affected the land use patterns and commoditization of land. Okay. Then second examiner and even myself noticed that the researcher has made a bold initiative by turning away from the conventional social science research methodology. You does not approve of human beings or social issues being reduced to the level of statistical aggregates. And we agree with you, but the second examiner posed a question that, I noticed that you have answered partially before this, when you have answered the question put up by Dr. Saju. How the researcher would differentiate naturalistic inquiry from other non-conventional methodological approaches in social sciences, which too have emerged with the same objectives. For example, participatory research appraisal. So this is the question: how the naturalistic inquiry can be differentiated from other non-conventional methodological approaches in social sciences with more or less the same objective. Okay.
One of the distinct features of naturalistic inquiry is the acceptance of all the significant data, not taking into account of its form or content. When we look at the grounded theory, for example, this is also very close to the field-based knowledge production. The intention of grounded theory is to generate a new theory. But in naturalistic inquiry, the primary intention is not to generate a new theory. And when we look at the other methods like ethnography is more close to the cultural dimensions of a particular. But whereas naturalistic inquiry is not solely focusing on or prioritizing the cultural dimensions, it also looks into all the relevant things, which is seemingly significant for the for a particular social phenomenon. And in participatory research appraisal, I think I have, in my readings on research methodology, I have not find any significant writings on participatory research methodology. I have gone through materials on participatory rural appraisal, PRA. But in my viewpoint, in my understanding, sometimes maybe not purely true, but the thing is, in my understanding, participatory rural appraisal is also very close to naturalistic inquiry, especially in this context, because this study is also focusing on a rural situation. But participatory rural appraisal, PRA, is mainly adopted by NGOs and all, and their the major concern of that particular method is to generate, to get an idea about the people's perception, and it is more anthropocentric by nature. But here in naturalist, and there is no need to have a theoretical premise or a theoretical backup for PRA. But in naturalistic inquiry, the researcher should have a theoretical backup, either during the preliminary stages, or he is supposed to keep on seeing things in a theoretical perspective. So this is something which makes naturalistic, and which made me interested in conducting a naturalistic inquiry. It is also because here the basic concept itself have been theoretically formulated, the spatial transformation. So this is my understanding about the methodology.
Okay, thank you. And I have noticed that in the thesis in page number 113, you made a statement that methodology used here is close to triangulation. I think that is a somewhat a loose position, and in all the other places where you have discussed the methodology, you were very clear in your presentation. But here you have made such a comment or such a statement. What is your response to that?
Yeah, the triangulation always presupposes proper correlation between quantitative as well as qualitative dimensions. But here, of course, in certain cases, for example, for assessing the discourse of land commoditization, that is a qualitative dimension, qualitative aspect, I have definitely gone for the statistical tools like intensity of, that was clearly assessed on the basis of the intensity of land transaction. Land as a potential legal entity is also correlated with the legislations and all. So in some of the cases, I have tried to correlate the qualitative assumptions or qualitative aspects by connecting it with the quantitative dimensions. But that kind of a connection or a correspondence was not possible in all the cases, especially land as an environmental concern. That discourse is a kind of an idea generated from the experiences and through the communication with the respondents I have gathered. So there is no backup of the quantitative backup of quantitative statistics or quantitative data for asserting this kind of a discourse. So triangulation definitely I have used in many cases. I have tried to correlate the statistical data with the qualitative dimensions in many cases, but there were so many other things in which this kind of a correspondence cannot be controlled. So that is why I have deliberately avoided asserting that this is something like I have adopted a triangulation.
Yeah, thank you. That you have stated everywhere that you followed a mixed research methodology. But I have a feeling that the overall flavor of the research report is more qualitative in nature. You may not agree with me. And what is your response to that? How you deliberately give more attention to the qualitative dimensions of the study
one of the major thing by which I have avoided asserting it as a qualitative study, because in the preliminary stages of this research, especially for getting a clear idea about the nature, type, number of the intensity of land transactions, fragmentation and all, these are all very core areas in this particular research. All these things have been assessed on the basis of statistical techniques as raw data, which I have availed from different documents, secondary sources and all. Even the land abandonment itself is being assessed on the basis of secondary data availed from the census reports. So I cannot say that this research is purely based on qualitative data. As you said, the predominant part of the research is definitely owes to qualitative techniques, but at the ground level, I have used so many statistical information, and it is on the basis of this particular information I have elaborated. I always try to elaborate the quantitative dimensions into qualitative elements. So this that is why I try to negate the dichotomy between qualitative and quantitative techniques. So that is also I have mentioned in the research. As you said, it is predominantly a qualitative research, but it is strongly grounded on statistics.
Okay, right, thank you. I really appreciate your effort for finding out much data from very old land documents. I know the difficulty in visiting the government offices, especially the village office and all, for collecting such data, such information. And that is really one of the very strong dimensions of this study. And one more thing, the second examiner noticed that the study on the whole is adopted a longitudinal design. But you know that in our PhD researches, generally most of the studies are cross-sectional in nature, which is a time-stopping affair, where you are claiming that your study is longitudinal in nature. So it should be a diachronic study where the influence of time over a period is to be noticed. That is how things are changing, how social phenomena are transforming with the passage of time. So how you manage to understand the influence of time in this particular study where you have analyzed the urbanization and other related phenomena? Because as a researcher, you have only very limited time, because in many of the longitudinal studies, as we know, 3 studies are generally carried out. Once after conducting one cross-sectional study, again the researcher is going back to the same field for conducting another study, so that he can understand how the influence of time has, what is the influence of time over the social phenomena. So that is my concern, how you have adopted this longitudinal design.
Here, the longitudinal design is, in my viewpoint, it is perceived as the tracing the genealogy of discourses. In that perspective, it is longitudinal. But when we consider the data I have gathered, it also covered so many cross-sectional aspects. Basically, because of the theoretical assumption of adoption of the theoretical assumption of discursive changes. I have generally perceived it as a longitudinal study, and the data also before the historical aspects. I have gone through the literatures on history, and from the 1900s onwards, the data was till the 1900 to 1950. For that period, the data was generally confined to the secondary sources, and in 1950 onwards, I have attempted interviews with different generations. That is, in that way, it is perceived as a longitudinal study.
Okay, Mr. Shailendra Verma, these are the questions and comments from the 3 adjudicators. Now, Dr. Dilip, shall I go forward with the final remarks?
Yes, of course.
Okay. Now, almost all the formalities of the open defense are over. Now, based on the positive recommendations of the evaluation reports of all the 3 adjudicators and the successful defense of the thesis by the candidate at the online open defense mode and the YYOC examination, I recommend that Mr. Shailendra Verma R to be awarded the PhD degree in sociology by the Sri Sankaracharya University of Sanskrit, Kaladi. Hearty congratulations to Shailendra Verma for the successful completion of your PhD research. Thank you all. Now over to Dr. Dilip.
Yes, well, we have reached the final phase of the open defense and YYOC examination. And it's my privilege and obligation to render the vote of thanks to all who have attended this event. The chairman of the board of adjudicators, Dr. Jose Boben, has conducted the open defense and YYOC examination, has declared the result and recommendation above. Dr. Jose Boben is one of my good friends for the past several years and a well-wisher of this department. For the sake of formality, I, on behalf of the university, the department and myself, extend him a very cordial thanks for conducting the open defense
Thank you,
and declaring the result. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Dilip.
I also thank Dr. Biju Vincent, head of the department, for hosting the open defense, and all other dignitaries and students who have actively participated in the discussions and making the program a big success. Finally, I take this opportunity to congratulate Sri Shailendra Verma for his achievement. Hearty congratulations, Shailendra.
Thank you.
Thank you all once again. Now let us close the meeting. The participants may leave the meeting now. It is concluded. Thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you.